After 15 years of marriage, my wife left me. She said she was leaving for a man she deserved. I just looked at her. I gave a simple nod, and I walked away. She laughed as I left. She thought I was weak, pathetic. She thought I was nothing. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I was the secret majority owner of her company, her real boss. 2 days later, her CEO called her in an absolute panic. I had just activated a single, hidden clause in her executive contract. The one clause I created for moments just like this. The one that would destroy her entire career. Musik penganter yang pellen dan menegankan dimulai. This is a story about the difference between weakness and silence. What she mistook for a white flag was actually the calm before the storm. You are not going to want to miss a single second of this. Welcome to Inspiration Seeker. If you believe that the best victories are the ones no one sees coming, you are in the right place. Do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to play the long game to get what you deserve? Let's begin. The restaurant was called Astra. It was one of those insufferable places in Midtown Manhattan, all glass and steel, where the views of the city are supposed to justify the microscopic portions on the plates. This was, of course, her choice for our 15th wedding anniversary. I sat across from Eleanor. 15 years. It felt like a lifetime. She looked exactly like the high-powered senior vice president she was, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant style, a dress that probably cost more than my first car. She looked sharp. She looked successful. She looked bored. And me. I was just Marcus. I wore a simple, dark gray suit. No flash. No $10,000 watch. In a city built on perception, I have always found my greatest advantage is to be perceived as average. To be underestimated. Eleanor hadn't really looked at me all night. Her world was happening on the glowing screen of her phone, which she held just below the table. Her thumb was a blur, typing furiously. I could catch the muted whispers of her conversation. She was texting her friends from work. Finally stepping up, I heard her whisper brag into the device, pretending it was a voicemail. Destined for bigger things. You know. A small, bitter smile almost touched my lips. I knew exactly what she meant by bigger things. Or rather, who she meant. Julian. The charismatic, slick-haired executive director at her firm. A man who wore his ambition like cheap cologne. I'd seen him at the company holiday parties. Parties I was forced to attend as a +1, hiding in plain sight. Parties for a company I owned. Eleanor had no idea. She thought I was just a quiet, moderately successful consultant. She had no clue that Blackwood Holdings, the mysterious private equity firm that had acquired her company, Apex Marketing Strategies, 9 months ago, was me. The waiter brought the check. It was, as expected, astronomical. Eleanor didn't even look at it. She just gestured vaguely in my direction. You got this. I nodded. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small, simple money clip, sliding out the cash to cover the bill and a generous tip. I saw it. It was a small movement, but I saw it. Her eyes flickered to the cash, and then to me. And she rolled them. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible eye roll. The kind that said, "Who still uses cash? It's so common." She was embarrassed by me. She looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. She saw a quiet, simple man in an off-the-rack suit paying with paper money. She didn't see the man who signed the paychecks for her entire building. She had already left me. She just hadn't said the words yet. The ride back to our apartment on the Upper West Side was silent. The silence was a heavy, suffocating blanket. She stared out her window at the passing lights of Columbus Circle, and I just focused on the road. The air in the car was so thick with unspoken words, it was hard to breathe. We walked into the apartment lobby. The doorman, Miguel, nodded. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood." Eleanor didn't even acknowledge him. She just marched straight to the elevator, her heels clicking angrily on the marble floor. I gave Miguel a small, apologetic nod. He was a good man. The elevator ride up to the 20th floor was more of the same oppressive quiet. The ding of the elevator arriving at our private foyer was sharp, violent. She didn't bother taking her coat off. She threw her keys onto the glass console table with a loud clatter. She spun around, her arms crossed. This was it. This was the speech she'd been rehearsing. "Marcus, I'm leaving you." She said it just like that. As if she were closing a business deal. As if she were firing a junior associate who hadn't met their quarterly goals. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. She took my silence as an invitation to continue. "I've been seeing someone. It's Julian." Of course it was. "I've wasted too much time, Marcus," she said, starting to pace. "I am destined for something more than this. Than you. Julian sees me. He's ambitious. He's my equal. He's what I deserve." There was that word again. Deserve. The entitlement dripped from it. She stopped pacing and looked at me, really looked at me for the first time all night. She was searching for a reaction. For me to yell, to beg, to throw something. To give her the drama she felt this moment required. I just gave a simple, slow nod. "All right, Eleanor." Her face twisted. This wasn't the script she had practiced. "All right. That's it? All right." I turned and walked toward our bedroom. Her bedroom, really. It was all her taste, all her design. Cold, modern, gray. I went to the walk-in closet, past her 3 racks of designer suits and the wall of shoes, to my small section in the back. I grabbed a simple black duffel bag. My go bag. I always had one packed. I put in a fresh shirt, a charging cable, and my laptop. That was it. Eleanor followed me, her voice rising. Finally finding that righteous anger she'd been looking for. 15 years, Marcus. And that's all I get? A nod. You won't even fight for me. I zipped the bag. I walked past her toward the front door. She grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight. Say something. Yell. Prove you're not this weak, passive man you've become. I paused. I looked down at her hand on my arm. Then I looked back up, meeting her eyes. Goodbye, Eleanor. I gently removed her hand and walked out the door. I heard her scream in frustration as the door clicked shut behind me. You're weak. Do you hear me? You're a weak man. She was wrong. Weakness is loud. Weakness begs and screams and makes a scene. Silence. Silence is strength. Silence is strategy. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone was already in my hand. I wasn't calling a friend. I was calling my legal team. The game had just begun. A weak man goes to a cheap motel. A weak man calls a friend, crying. A weak man gets drunk at a bar and tells his story to a stranger. I did none of those things. I got in a cab and gave an address in Tribeca. The driver didn't say a word. The building I arrived at was anonymous. An old industrial brick facade that blended perfectly into the cobblestone street. There was no doorman, just a reinforced steel door with a discreet biometric panel. I pressed my thumb to the scanner. It glowed green. A private elevator was waiting. The apartment Eleanor and I shared was designed to impress her friends. It was cold, full of sharp edges and shades of white and gray. It was her space. The elevator doors opened directly into my space. My penthouse wasn't a home. It was a command center. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides offered an unobstructed, godlike view of the city, from the Statue of Liberty all the way up to the glittering needle of the Empire State. The air smelled like old leather and dark wood. I took off the simple gray suit jacket, my Marcus costume, and tossed it onto a leather Eames chair. I walked to the bar, unbuttoned my cuffs, and poured 3 fingers of Macallan 25 into a heavy crystal glass. No ice. I walked to my desk. It wasn't a desk. It was a monolith. A single 10-foot slab of polished obsidian. On it sat a single, closed laptop and 1 file folder. The folder was thin, navy blue. The label read, Apex Marketing Strategies. I took a sip of the scotch. The warmth spread through my chest, sharp and clear. 9 months. For 9 months, Blackwood Holdings had been the 51% majority shareholder of Apex. My firm. My name. Another simple, boring detail Eleanor had overlooked in her quest for glamour. She was so busy climbing the corporate ladder, she never bothered to look at who owned the ladder. She had complained for weeks about the secretive, cutthroat new owners who were demanding audits and efficiency reports. She whispered with her colleagues about who this mysterious Mr. Blackwood was. They assumed he was some old-money European recluse. They never, not for 1 second, connected him to the quiet husband sitting next to her at the company Christmas party. I opened the file. Inside was her executive compensation package. I'd read it a dozen times. I'd helped draft it. She had no idea that I had personally signed off on her last 6-figure bonus. She had no idea that when she practiced her big pitch for Julian in our living room, she was actually practicing in front of the man she would be pitching to. I looked out the window at the city. My city. My company. She thought she had left a weak man. She had no idea she had just declared war on a king. I picked up my phone. It wasn't to a friend. It wasn't to my family. It was to my general counsel, who I knew was awake. "David," I said, my voice now different. Colder, sharper. The voice of Mr. Blackwood. "It's time. Activate Clause 7C. The man I called was not David, the CEO. You never start with the CEO. You start with the man who handles the CEO. I called Ben Strauss, my general counsel. Ben has been with me since Blackwood Holdings was just an idea sketched on a legal pad. He's a man who understands that law isn't about justice. It's about structure. It's about building traps." It was 2:17 a.m. He picked up on the first ring. Mr. Blackwood, his voice was crisp, awake. He was always awake. "Ben, activate Clause 7C, I said, swirling the scotch in my glass. There was a pause. Not of surprise, but of calculation. Understood. For which entity? Apex Marketing Strategies. I want a full, deep dive audit initiated by 8 a.m. Focus on the senior executive team. Specifically, Eleanor Blackwood and Julian Vance. I want every expense report, every client dinner receipt, every single asset declaration they've filed since our acquisition. Of course, Ben said. The trigger, I said, is that I am activating my rights as the principal stakeholder. This right here is the part Eleanor never understood. When you sign a contract with Blackwood Holdings, you're not just signing an employment agreement. You're signing a meticulously crafted weapon aimed squarely at your own head. Clause 7C. I wrote it myself with Ben's help years ago. We call it the Blackwood Clause. It's buried deep in the boilerplate. It looks like any other standard termination for cause language. It isn't. Most contracts have morality clauses. They're vague, messy, hard to enforce. I don't care about morality. I don't care that my wife is sleeping with another man. That's a personal failure. I am a businessman, and I only care about financial failure. Clause 7C states that any senior executive can be terminated for cause if they are found to have, either knowingly or through gross negligence, caused material financial or reputational harm to Blackwood Holdings, its subsidiaries, or, and this is the beautiful part, any of its principal undisclosed stakeholders. Me. By signing that contract, Eleanor legally agreed to a code of conduct not just toward her company, but toward me, the anonymous man she lived with. She just didn't know it. And termination for cause is the kill shot. It means no severance package, no golden parachute, no graceful exit. It means every single unvested stock option she's been salivating over worth, I'd calculate, about $8.7 million, is immediately forfeited. All pending bonuses? Gone. Her career? Vaporized. Ben's voice brought me back. The audit team will be at Apex by sunrise. They will be discreet. They will find any discrepancies. Good, I said. Let me know the second they do. I hung up. I looked at the file on my desk. Eleanor and Julian. They were arrogant. They were sloppy. In their rush to build their new life, in their contempt for me, they would have made a mistake. The affair wasn't the breach of contract. The affair was just the reason to look for the breach. And I knew, with absolute certainty, I wouldn't have to wait long. The next 48 hours were, by all accounts, a victory lap for Eleanor. While my audit team, a quiet, ruthless group of forensic accountants flown in from Chicago, took over a secure conference room on the 14th floor under the guise of a routine Q3 review, Eleanor and Julian were busy celebrating their new lives on the 40th. She must have felt high on it. The freedom, the power, the thrill of finally casting off her boring, weak husband. She and Julian didn't just show up to work together. They arrived. They walked into the Apex lobby holding hands. They got coffee, laughing loudly. They took over the main boardroom for a strategy session that involved no one but themselves. They were the new power couple, and they wanted every single employee to know it. They thought their combined talent and charisma made them untouchable. Eleanor especially was on fire. She was energized, charismatic. She was closing deals. She was giving orders. She was, in her mind, finally the woman she was always meant to be. And Julian. Julian was preening. He was the man who had won the prize. He walked around the office like he'd just conquered a kingdom, patting junior associates on the back, his expensive watch catching the light. He was the king, and she was his queen. I got updates from my audit team leader every 2 hours. At 10 a.m., my team saw Julian use the company credit card, the one I ultimately paid the bill for, to order a $500 bouquet of roses to be delivered to Eleanor's desk. The card on it, seen by the entire open plan office, read, "To a future that's finally worthy of us. J." At 1 p.m., they expensed a 3-hour lunch at Le Bernardin. The bill was just under $1,200. The justification listed on the receipt? Client strategy session. Blackwood Holdings account. The irony was delicious. They were celebrating their victory over me, on my dime. But the real prize they were after was bigger. They were preparing a pitch for the new $50 million campaign from OmniCorp. And by preparing, I mean they were stealing. My team, digging through server logs, found that Eleanor had accessed the personal drive of a brilliant, quiet junior strategist named Sarah Jenkins. Sarah had been working on a groundbreaking concept for months. Eleanor had downloaded the entire presentation, changed the cover slide to list her and Julian's names as the creative leads, and booked a meeting with the client for the following week. They weren't just careless. They were reckless. They were drunk on their own perceived power. They believed they had won. They thought the game was over. They had no idea that while they were planning their bright new future, my accountants, working in a silent room 26 floors below them, were pulling the pin on a grenade that was about to vaporize it all. It happened on the second day. A Wednesday. 4:32 p.m. While my audit team was finalizing their report, a beautiful, damning document filled with falsified receipts, stolen intellectual property, and gross misuse of company funds, Eleanor and Julian were in his corner office. The blinds were open. They wanted people to see them. They were drinking champagne. My team had a visual from the security feed. It was a $300 bottle of Veuve Clicquot, charged, naturally, to the company account under Team Morale. They were toasting. Probably to the OmniCorp pitch they had stolen. Probably to their new life. Probably to the weak husband she had finally gotten rid of. Right then, Ben Strauss, my counsel, made his call. He didn't call Eleanor. He didn't call Julian. He called David Miller, the CEO. David is a man who understands one thing: money. He's a classic corporate man, all expensive suits and feigned authority. But he knows who really holds the power. He knows Blackwood Holdings can fire him with a single email. So when Ben Strauss calls him, David stands up. Straight. Ben's message was simple. David, this is counsel for Blackwood Holdings. Pursuant to Clause 7C of the Executive Agreement, we are flagging a material breach by Senior VP Eleanor Blackwood and ED Julian Vance. A full audit report is being sent to your inbox now. You are to secure all their network access, escort them from the building, and await further instructions. This is effective immediately. David, I am told, went white. He opened the email. He saw the first page of the report, The $1,200 lunch, the roses, the stolen pitch, all neatly itemized. But that wasn't the worst part. We'd found the real leverage. This is where my world and his collided. While David was having his world collapse, Eleanor's phone buzzed on Julian's desk. She looked at it. The screen read, David Miller. She rolled her eyes. She ignored it. She was busy. She was celebrating. A second later, it rang again. And again immediately after she silenced it. The persistence finally broke through her champagne haze. This wasn't a check-in call. This was panic. She finally picked it up, her voice sharp and annoyed. David, I'm in the middle of something. She was cut off. It wasn't David, the CEO, speaking. It was just David, a terrified man. I heard the recording of the call later. His voice was high-pitched, cracking. Eleanor. My God, Eleanor, where are you? Are you with Julian? Get to my office. No, wait. Don't. Just get your coat. You have to leave. You have to leave the building right now. Eleanor's smug expression faltered. What are you talking about? David, slow down. And then, David said the words that would echo in her head for the rest of her life. It's Blackwood. He almost screamed. Blackwood Holdings. They just called. They're invoking Clause 7C. They're dissolving your contract. They're sending security. Eleanor. He took a sharp, ragged breath. He had just connected the final piece. The name on the audit report. The name he'd seen on her HR file. Eleanor. Do you have any idea what he just did? He said it was a personal breach. He said, your husband. Silence. The champagne glass slipped from her hand. It didn't shatter. It just hit the plush carpet with a dull, wet thud. Your husband. The two words didn't belong together. Blackwood and husband. It was impossible. It was a category error. It was like saying the sky was green. She was frozen. Julian was standing there, his smile gone, asking, Ellie? What is it? What's wrong? She couldn't answer. She just stared at the phone in her hand as the line went dead. The panic had finally arrived. She didn't run. She walked. Julian told me later, during his very cooperative exit interview, that it was the strangest thing he'd ever seen. She just placed her phone down on his desk, perfectly centered, and walked out of his office. Her face was a blank mask. She walked past the junior associates, past the rows of desks, past the reception area for the executive floor. She didn't see any of them. Your husband. The words were an impossibility. A glitch in the matrix. Marcus. He was quiet. He read books. He wore simple suits. He paid for dinner in cash. He was the man she pitied. He was the man she had left for being weak. Blackwood was Blackwood. A ghost. A myth. A ruthless, unseen force that had acquired apex 9 months ago. Blackwood was a name whispered in fear in the boardroom. Blackwood was power. They could not be the same man. She arrived at David Miller's office. The door was open. He wasn't on the phone. He was just sitting at his desk, his $5,000 suit jacket thrown on the floor. His tie was loose. He was staring at his laptop, his face the color of ash. David, she said. Her voice was flat, mechanical. What was that call? David looked up. The fear in his eyes was visceral. This wasn't a boss talking to a subordinate. This was a terrified employee talking to the walking dead. He had seen the audit report. He knew. Eleanor, he whispered. You need to go. Security is on the way up. What was that call? She repeated, not moving. What did you mean? My husband. David just shook his head, looking back at his screen as if the answer was there. I don't know what you did, Eleanor. But you did it. He spun the laptop around to face her. It wasn't the audit report. It was an email. A direct, final email from Ben Strauss, my counsel. Subject: termination of Eleanor Blackwood and Julian Vance. The email was brief, brutal, and legally airtight. It referenced the audit, the misuse of funds, the theft of intellectual property. And then, at the bottom, was the kill shot. The legal justification for invoking Clause 7C. It read, "These breaches constitute a direct and material financial harm against the principal stakeholder of Blackwood Holdings. Per Mrs. Blackwood's own contract, this is a non-negotiable, for-cause termination. All assets, unvested options, and bonuses are forfeit." Eleanor's eyes scanned the text, but the words weren't making sense. "The principal stakeholder," she whispered. "Who?" David finally looked her right in the eye. The pity was gone, replaced by a cold, survivalist fury. He was distancing himself from the explosion. "Marcus," he said, his voice flat. "Your husband. The man you brought to the Christmas party." He hit a key, and a different file opened. It was the Blackwood Holdings Incorporation document. A document David himself had probably only seen an hour ago. And there, at the top, was the name. Marcus A. Blackwood. Founder and CEO. Eleanor made a sound. It was small, involuntary, like the air being forced from her lungs. It all clicked. The simple suit. The lack of flash. The quiet observation. The consulting job that kept him busy but never seemed to require an office. His complete, utter lack of reaction when she left him. It wasn't weakness. It was indifference. It was the indifference of a god watching an ant try to insult it. He hadn't been weak. He had been bored. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hand coming up to her mouth. He owns this. He owns everything. He owns me, Eleanor." David suddenly snapped, his terror turning to rage. "Now get out. You're poison. Get out of my office." And that's when the two uniformed security guards appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Blackwood, we've been instructed to escort you from the premises." You see, the affair was never the weapon. The affair, the stolen pitch, the champagne, those were just evidence of her arrogance. They were symptoms. They were the reason to pull her file, but they weren't the bullet. The bullet was something she had done after she left me, in her first act of freedom. While security escorted a completely numb Eleanor to her office, they were met by Ben Strauss. Not David. David was now irrelevant. Ben was there to supervise. He handed her a single piece of paper. It was the for-cause justification. She thought even then that it was about Julian, that it was a personal vendetta. She was still thinking too small. "I don't understand," she stammered, looking at the document. This is about the Omnicorp pitch? The expenses." Ben just looked at her. "No, Ms. Blackwood. We're terminating you for the $250,000. Eleanor froze. "The what?" 2 days ago, Ben said, his voice as flat as a legal document. "The morning after you left your husband, you initiated a wire transfer. $250,000. You moved it from your joint checking account, M&E Blackwood, to a new private account under your maiden name." She stared at him, confused. That's my money. It's a joint account. It's marital assets for the divorce. That's not illegal." A tiny, cold smile touched Ben's lips. "You are correct, Ms. Blackwood. It's not illegal. It's just a breach of contract." And there it was. The final, beautiful, elegant piece of the trap. Ben pointed to a line item on the paper. "You've been an executive for 15 years, Eleanor. You should have read your husband's financial statements, the ones you filed jointly every year." She didn't understand. "That joint account," Ben continued, "the one you thought was just your household bill pay account? It's not. It's legally registered as an operational slush fund for Blackwood Holdings Subsidiary 4. It's one of Mr. Blackwood's primary holding accounts. Your name was on it as a courtesy." The blood drained from her face. "When you left Mr. Blackwood, you thought you were securing divorce assets. What you actually did was wire $250,000 without authorization, directly from a corporate account belonging to the majority shareholder, to yourself. It's called embezzlement. It's called theft." Ben tapped the paper. That, he said, is the material financial harm stipulated in Clause 7C. You didn't just break his heart, Ms. Blackwood. You stole from his company. She finally understood. It wasn't about the affair. It was never about the affair. This was a corporate execution. She hadn't been fired by a jealous husband. She had been terminated by a CEO whose trust she had violated. The affair just told me when to look. The expense reports just told me where to look. But her own greed, her own rush to secure her money, that is what signed her death warrant. She had built her own gallows and handed me the rope. She looked at the paper. She looked at her office being packed into a cardboard box. All of it. The $8.7 million in stock options. The bonus. The title. The reputation. All gone. Because she didn't read the fine print. Of course, a good purge is never about just one person. A cancer isn't cured by removing half the tumor. While Eleanor was having her entire worldview dismantled by Ben Strauss, Julian was still in his office. He had watched her walk out in a daze. He saw the security guards. He saw Ben. He was confused, but his arrogance was still his primary shield. He probably thought this was some HR mistake. Then he heard it. The gasp that rippled through the open-plan office as Eleanor was handed the cardboard box. That got his attention. He burst out of his office. "Hey, what the hell is going on here?" he shouted. "You can't just... Where's David?" David. He was loud. He was making a scene. He was trying to assert the dominance he thought he had. He was trying to save his new prize. Ben Strauss didn't even turn around. He simply nodded to the second security guard, who had been waiting patiently. The guard stepped forward, blocking Julian's path. "Mr. Vance," the guard said impassively. "You're damn right," Julian snapped. "Now what is this?" Ben finally turned, a new, much thinner file in his hand. He walked over to Julian. "Mr. Vance," Ben said, his voice bored. "You are also terminated. Effective immediately. For cause." Julian just stared at him. "What? On what grounds?" "You can't." "I didn't do anything." Ben opened the file. "On the grounds of gross misconduct, conspiracy to steal intellectual property, namely, the Omnicorp pitch from Ms. Jenkins, and systematic fraudulent expense reporting." A piece of paper was handed to him. It was a summary. The $1,200 client lunch with Eleanor. The $300 champagne for team morale. The $500 bouquet of roses. A pattern of petty theft going back months, all neatly detailed. All charged to my company. This is ridiculous. Julian stammered, his bravado finally cracking, replaced by a desperate, rat-like panic. That's standard practice. Eleanor approved. I approved." "Yes," Ben said. "You approved each other's fraudulent expenses. We call that collusion. And as for Ms. Blackwood approving them, I'm afraid her signature is no longer valid. As of 10 minutes ago." Julian looked from Ben to Eleanor, who was standing silently, her face as white as a sheet. He looked at the junior associates who were all watching, their faces a mixture of shock and, in some cases, poorly hidden satisfaction. He finally understood. He wasn't the new king. He wasn't the equal partner. He was just the and. He was the accessory. He was the co-conspirator. "This is her fault," he suddenly yelled, pointing at Eleanor. She told me to do it. She brought me into this. It was pathetic." Eleanor didn't even flinch. She was beyond hearing him. "Your personal dynamic is of no interest to Blackwood Holdings," Ben said. "You will be given one box for your personal effects. You will leave your company phone, laptop, and access card on the desk. You will be escorted out through the service elevator." He was just collateral damage. He had hitched his wagon to a star he thought was rising, not realizing it was a meteor burning up on re-entry. He looked around, defeated. There was no one to appeal to. David was locked in his office, no doubt updating his own resume. The power couple of Apex Marketing, The two people who had walked in that morning holding hands were now each silently packing a single sad cardboard box. The entire office watched as they were led away, not through the grand lobby, but to the cold concrete freight elevator in the back. It's been a month. I'm sitting at the head of the boardroom table at Apex Marketing Strategies, the long, polished mahogany one. This is the first time I've been in this room. The mood in the office is different. The fear is gone, replaced by a quiet, focused energy. The power couple cancer has been excised, and the rest of the body is healing. David Miller, the CEO, is at the other end of the table. He looks like a man who has aged 5 years in 30 days. He's humble now. He's attentive. He makes eye contact and holds it. He understands, finally, who he works for. The rest of the senior team is here. They've all survived the full, deep dive audit of the entire company. The ones who remained were the ones who actually did their jobs. Good morning, I say. My voice is quiet, but it fills the room. Thank you all for your patience during this transition. I know it's been abrupt, but Blackwood Holdings did not invest $400 million in this company to see it mismanaged by opportunists. Their eyes are all on me. They see me now. Not the +1 in the gray suit. They see the man who signs the checks. Let's talk about the Omnicorp account, I continue. A few people shift nervously. This was the account Eleanor and Julian were going to steal. David, I say, the audit report mentioned a junior strategist. The one whose work was plagiarized. Jenkins. Sarah Jenkins. Is she still with us? David blinks, surprised by the question. He quickly consults his notes. Yes, Mr. Blackwood. She is. She's in the junior creative pool. Is she? I look down the table. Why? No one has an answer. Her pitch, I say, the real one, the one my audit team recovered from the server logs, was brilliant. It was fresh. It was the only reason Omnicorp was even considering us. It was, in short, the only thing of real value that's come out of this executive team in months. I lean forward. So, I ask again, why is she still in the junior pool? David finally understands. I will rectify that, sir. You will, I confirm. You will call Ms. Sarah Jenkins into your office this afternoon. You will give her a formal apology on behalf of the company. You will then give her Eleanor Blackwood's office, and her title, and her salary, and you will give her the Omnicorp account, effective immediately. Is that clear? Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Perfectly. I stand up and walk to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city. Eleanor thought this was about revenge. She thought I was a weak man lashing out. Revenge is a fool's game. It's emotional, it's messy, it's expensive. I don't do revenge. I do restructuring. I didn't destroy her career to punish her. I destroyed her career to protect my investment. She and Julian weren't just disloyal to me personally. They were liabilities. They were stealing resources, suppressing talent, and poisoning the culture of a company I owned. I didn't take her down. I simply activated the clause that she herself had signed. She did the rest. I turned back to the room. Blackwood Holdings invests in talent, ladies and gentlemen, not in ego. Find the talent. Promote it. Or I'll find someone who will. I gave a simple nod. That will be all. As they filed out of the room, David stayed behind for a moment. Mr. Blackwood, thank you. I just looked at him. It wasn't personal. It was just good business.